is Nora. Hi, this is Hannah. We are working together to give this presentation. Our topic is about sexism and wokeness. In our presentation, we will have 4 parts. The first part is showing the rhetoric situation. The second part is briefly presenting the feminism perspective. The third part is applying the feminism perspective into the comparison of the company of wolves and the Little Red Riding Hood from 2 points. One is that women's voices and silence. Another is women's empowerment. In the end, we will give a conclusion. In our presentation, we will focus on 1 question: how Angela Carter effectively delivered his feministic perspectives in the company of wolves. So what is the rhetoric situation? Barkey stated in 1988 that women's oppression under the male domination has deprived women of political and legal rights. Even worse, the extent of women's oppression has permeated into the structure of our society and our culture. Such permeated structure and society in turn influences social expectation to women and becomes one cause of women's oppression and leads to a sexist society. Until today, women has fought for around 50 years. Women have brought their voices in from silence. But today, the issue is how women can effectively give their voices to public. Rhetoric as a form of energy in communication provides us a new direction to think of how women can effectively to deliver their feministic thoughts.
In the following, I will introduce the feminism perspective, which will be used to analyze the rhetorical power of Carter's The Company of Wolves and the Grimm's Little Red Riding Hood. Feminism is both an intellectual commitment and a political movement that seeks justice for women and the end of sexism in all forms. What distinguishes feminism from other liberation struggles is its concern with sexism. Therefore, to end that sexism and the sexist oppression, feminists apply a wide range of perspectives on social, cultural, or political phenomena. And when we analyze the rhetorical studies from the feminist perspective, there are 3 tasks of it. The first one is to expose the mechanisms of cultural silencing. Who is speaking refers to the one who possesses the authority to speak. The feminist rhetoric consciously attempts to reveal the authority and legitimation of the dominant discourse. The second one is to revalue, dismiss, or ignore the women's writing. And the last one is to recover alternative forms of women's creative expression. The imagination and creativity of women are as equal as those of men. This part, I will talk about women's voices and silence that will be embodied in Carter's The Company of Wolves and the Grimm's Little Red Riding Hood. As I mentioned before, the first task of feminism literary criticism is to expose the mechanisms of cultural silencing, namely who is speaking and who is silenced. In The Company of Wolves, Carter depicted a silenced woman in the rhetoric of oppression. On her wedding night, her husband vanished clean away after she heard a wolf howling from the forest. And after she remarried another man and had her babies, her first husband came back and saw her remarriage as a shameful betrayal. Here is an excerpt of the story, and she called the woman whore and turned into a wolf to tear off her eldest boy's left foot. And as the woman wept for her dead first man and her tragedy, her second husband beat her again. In the rhetoric of oppression, language is a strong ideological weapon, but here, women possessed no authority and voiced little except for crying and waiting, while 2 men Two men abused violence to her in similar ways. The woman is overpowered by male thought and reduced to a passive object in a patriarchal society. And in the Little Red Riding Hood, there is another innocent but voiceless girl. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother were swollen by a tricky wolf, but they were eventually saved by a heroic huntsman. During this process, they are both empowered by men, no matter they are offenders or protectors. And even the almost fatal encounter was considered as a punishment of her disobedience against the order and authority. And it implies the notion of a gender inequality.
So the second part is about women empowerment. The problem is not that gender differences are not valued. The problem is that they are defined by power. In Grimm's The Little Red Riding Hood, the little red is naive and tender. She has no power to combat with the wolf, and she can only wait for the huntsman to save her life. However, the little red in the company of wolves reverses the previous story. The girl took advantage of her fresh body to induce the wolf and turned the dangerous situation into a relative safe one. The girl's action completely violated the structure of social and of society and culture, where a woman should be subordinate, a woman should be conversation, a woman should not allowed to front the men, and they are not allowed to show their body. But the reader at Angela Carter's time, when the reader at Angela Carter's time firstly read The Company of Wolves, they may feel extreme shocked because of the reverses of reality. And they may think, how can she do this? This is a very shameful action for a female. But think a second, why she can't do like this? The wolf is going to eat her. She is facing a danger of death, and she just saves her life by her own power. Angela Carter intends to tell the readers that women should have the power, and women should use the power to protect themselves from being offended. And this is her rhetoric strategy. Angela Carter is convincing her powerful feministic energy to the readers by reversing the socially constructed values of women and attacking the reality, and thereby evoke the reader's consciousness of women power.
In conclusion, we believe that gender equality still has a long way to go. Sexism and sexist oppression is the nature of the wrong that feminism seeks to address. From the comparison of Carter's The Company of Wolves and Grimm's Little Red Riding Hood, we can see the great influence of gender on individual identities and female power in a male-dominated society. For future research or studies, we expect to see how the feminist rhetoric is influenced by other issues. The differences of race, class, and nationality also contribute to the gender struggles in modern society. That's all, thank you, and here are our references.